Hey, my name is Matt. Welcome to Variable 73. During this episode, I'll be reviewing Season 1, Episode 4 of Amazon's Rings of Prime. Yeah, I guess, I'm going to keep doing at least... I want to do full reviews to the first season, and I'll do my lore versus the Legendarium versus Rings of Prime co-video for the first season, so at least I'll finish this crap show. So I have a separate video where I compare and contrast the actual lore of Legendarium with what the show's doing, but I will hold them accountable in the main review if they actually have a license for something and choose to replace it with their own subpar material. Okay? So let's get right into this. I don't want to make this one some sort of hour and a half, slam fest. Okay. So first up, we're going to go into the production stuff, which is where this show is just being destroyed, regardless of other things. So let's start with the visuals. They're still using that horrible washed out color palette that make everything like bright color, like a bright red is not supposed to look like a bright green, but they all blend in together with this color palette, and it just makes everything look drab, and things that should, like colors that should look somewhat different, less discernible. Onwards and downwards to the direction of the episode. The director, who is the same as the last episode, and who directed Wheel of Prime episodes, if I recall correctly, continues to allow the same mistakes as with the writing that he did in the last episode. Or maybe he thinks they're good. I don't know. For example, this show opened with a Numenorian baptismal ceremony. Like almost everything else before this, rather than let the ceremony explain itself, for example, the new mothers could be talking to Muriel, and she could be talking about the ceremony. Oh yes, you're the 207th generation of Numenorians to bring their children for this ceremony. It began when Elros had his grandchildren in Numenor. They could make that up, obviously, but that's nothing wrong with little stuff like that. Tell the lore in the context of the story, not basically have Tamiriel literally take a baby and walk up to the camera and explain to you what they're doing there. Okay. They just keep doing this non-contextual character exposition, and it takes you right out of it. It's annoying. Okay? Well, and also, I don't know if I should blame the showrunners or the directors or the writers for this, but it's kind of clear at this point that they filmed the season more like a giant movie rather than an episodic TV show. The Harpy, for example, they make no appearance in the show. And like last episode, I don't think Elrond and Celebrimbor made any appearances, if I remember correctly. Like whole segments of the plots aren't in whole episodes. And that would make sense if they filmed an 8-hour movie, for example, and designed the scripting that way. But and they just chunked it out after that. The acting, now we'll get to that, continues to not impress for the most part. The only actors who are entertaining to watch to any degree are Charlie Vickers, who plays Halbrand, and Lloyd Owens, who plays Elendil. So far. And those are of the main actors. There are a couple of supporting role actors, like the dude who plays Valendil. He seems to be doing the part really entertainingly. A couple of others. But regarding Charlie Vickers and Halbrand, the former is entertaining because most of us have accepted the rumor that Halbrand is Sauron, and we're basically rooting for him and enjoying him sort of wrecking stuff as he goes. And the latter with Lloyd Owens, even with the limited material he's been given, he's done an okay job with it. If it had to actually written the real Elendil in the show, I could see this guy playing him. I mean, no one's going to be as tall as Elendil should be tall, but, I remain convinced, by the way, thanks to Ismael Cruz Cordova, that I should do a Many Faces of Arondir video to show how horrible he is because of his singular, scowling, constipated face he uses for every scene he's in. Okay? And this inevitably leads us to the writing. It's amazing how the writing can actually get worse episode by episode. Last week, they basically turned the Harpy into a race of psychopaths. This week, they have a whole subplot which basically resolves around having Theo be seen by the orcs in the village so the orcs can see they have the flaming sword of Sauron or whatever Rings of Prime is going to call it, and then they not run away from the village despite having ample time to do so that Arondir can rescue him. Though it's not as bad as the only thing they have Galadriel continue to do is act like a spoiled Karen, demanding things go her way for most of the episode. So on the special effects, the costumes, and the scenery, the teams doing backgrounds and landscapes continue to excel. They're beautiful for the most part. The teams doing close range effects, whether practical CGI, mostly continue to disappoint at best. They're usually far worse. Once in a while, there's a cool close-up special effect type of thing, but it's rare with the close-up stuff. The teams doing costume continue to fail. I mean, although some of that could be because of the stupid drab color palette they're using to film this with, but most of the material they use for characters who wear robes, for example, looks like they were made from the same material motel curtains, are made of that sort of feel kind of like felt polyester with like it has like peach skin, that fuzz on it type of thing when you touch them, you know. Uh, so and now let's move on to the sound and audio. As usual, the score remains the best part of the show. And they even use some really bad writing to have an ultra slow-mo scene where Arendar, Theo, and Bronwyn are fleeing in slow motion from orcs to accentuate part of the score. The score was kind of enjoyable. The scene was stupid, so it made you hate the score. So let's go on to the plot review here. So, what are the major plot threads that this episode featured? Well, the three that I kind of hawked in on was we have Arondir being freed by Adar so he can tell the people in the watchtower that they have to submit to his rule or die. Then we have Theo coming up with the idea to go down to the local town during the day to recover food, which none of the adults come up with or think is a good idea. And then we have Galadriel acting like a total Karen, Karen Ladriel, I guess now, instead of Xena Ladriel, trying to get her way in Numenor. Sorry. Excuse me. We have Galadriel attempting badly to convince Tamriel that she can heal the wounds between our people and the elves by raising an army for Galadriel to do something in the Southlands. And by convincing, I mean demanding. Okay, And then we have several minor plots, like Isildur having some sort of visions which his brother may or may not have had. Elrond discovering the secret that the dwarves were keeping hidden, that the discovery of Mithril in this show, it's just been discovered. And then there's some other stuff, but most of what happens either leads to or spins out from those subplots. I'm mostly going to address the three major plots I just talked about. So let's on Arondir being captured by Adar in episode 3 after they stage the failed Great Elf escape. We open to Arendar. Let me pronounce the show. It's Arondir. They keep rolling the R's for some reason. Waking up as Adar approaches. I suppose the showrunners might have been trying to make the audience have some sort of emotional connection to the orcs and Adar by showing the funeral ritual. I mean, what else would, I don't know. Anyway, Adar sets Arondir free, and it looks like he fully rearms him so he can tell the people hiding in the watchtower that he needs to submit to his will or die. Now, one could quibble over the idea that Adar would have rearmed Arondir, or did Arondir find some weapons on the way back, etc. But it makes no logical sense to send him when he literally could have had an orc throw some message over a wall tied to the rocks, Or stand outside because at a distance and say it, so to speak. The reality is this was done solely for the sake of Arondir having him arrive just in time to save Theo and the next subplot that I'll talk about. In regards to Arondir saving Theo, by the way, the scene has no power and little believability because it comes out of nowhere. They should have shown a scene where Arondir is running swiftly through the land and stops because he hears Theo yell out or sees Theo and some other villagers like in the town or whatever, and then he heads towards them. The Southland storyline is very significant. It's literally the main storyline that Sauron wants to turn the Southlands into Mordor. His secret plan through these 4 episodes. Despite the show being called The Rings of Power, yet none of the characters in the Southland storyline are compelling, nor is Celebrimbor for that matter. The only character of the 3 main ones so far that has any audience appeal is Bronwyn, but they lose that in this episode by turning her into an incompetent leader. Why didn't they continue heading west away from where the orcs were after they got to the tower and obtained some semblance of order? And that rolls us right into Onward and Downward, the next subplot, the adventures of Theo in the abandoned town. Now, let me say this up front, okay? The idea of recovering supplies you left behind as you fled the town is conceptually okay. But consider, why wouldn't the orcs have taken those supplies for themselves? Why would Bronwyn flat out refuse to send some adult men to do this if they have weapons they could hunt with? Presumably they would have some means of defense against orcs in the daytime. Right? Also, why wouldn't the people in the tower continue to move westward away from that area once they had regrouped in the tower? They clearly had been there for a significant amount of time, since it was long enough for the elves to vacate it, be captured, all before Bronwyn and Arondir found the sick cow, which led Arondir to travel underground in the tunnels long enough to be captured and then enslaved for several days. That incredible run-on sentence should tell you how the timing alone should express how off the timing is. So, set all that aside. This entire subplot was based on two things. One of those things was not actually getting the food, which should have been the main issue. Okay. In fact, the things were making sure, the two things, one of them was making sure that the orcs found out that the humans in the tower just happened to have the flaming sword of Sauron, or whatever they're going to call it, and have Arondir basically do an RK out of nowhere to save Theo. Now, no, it seems pretty obvious, by the way, that Theo is Arondir's son. How Theo can be an anti-elf bigot, which we've seen, right? And not have noticed, his own pointed ears or his enhanced senses and so on. I don't know. That's more writing crap, inconsistency. It's hard to immerse yourself in a subplot when the characters remain unappealing and the actual plot is set up the big moment in some fashion or other, or engage in exposition to the audience. The idea of getting those supplies was not only interesting but vital. We should have seen a brief flashes of Arondir discovering the people from the town gather supplies with his enhanced senses at great range, but only he could detect the orcs lurking in the settlement, and he looks up to see heavy clouds closing in. Then Arondir changes where he's going and heads to try to save the people. That'll be another flashback, so you'd have the people gathering food and talking, then Arondir will flash in, you see him, hear them over there and look, and see orcs hiding in buildings and whatever, and hearing them, and then he starts running, and then you see the clouds coming over that Arondir noticed, and then you see the people in the town getting worried, and the orcs getting closer to the edge because the clouds are giving them the sun. Then flash to Arondir getting closer to the town, and so on and so forth. That would add a heroic element to his character, something which is severely lacking. Okay, so finally we have the story of Karen Ladriel as she demands her way across Numenor. Can they make her character any less appealing? She rampages across the world, refusing to try to persuade anyone to follow her quest with actual evidence. She always picks fights with people for no logical reason. She did this when she was first in the throne room with Tarmiriel, and Halbrand had to defuse that situation, right? And no one suspected, I said this, but no one suspected Halbrand, a regular guy who was more politically astute than a 3,000 or 4,000-year-old elf noble. She does it again by escaping to Elendil's home area. She does it again when Tarmiriel makes her decision, demanding to speak to the king. And she does it, and again when she escapes from the cell, beats up the guards, and goes looking for Palantir. The character as portrayed seems to be incapable of any long-term planning or investigatory process. From what we understand, all she does is take teams of warriors out to hunt for Sauron. She never engaged in politics, and therefore never develops either political skills or allies. She seems to have no flunkies who know how to gather intelligence also. And that's what she does in this episode. She just goes from scene to scene, demanding things go her way. Basically carrying it. That's pretty much the driving force of our plot. Karen Ladriel going from expedition to expedition, demanding others do what she wants. The writing team is doing this show no favors with the first 4 scripts. Even the actors who were known to have actual better acting skills have very little to work with. Some very short scenes. Excuse me. This damn show is giving me the hiccups. Some short scenes like Disa's first scene with Durin the Fourth, Disa interacting with our children, Elendil, Isildur, and Irian having dinner and talking like a family. Then they immediately go back for those maybe 30-second good scenes and submerge you in exposition and carrying and all sorts of bad stuff. I barely discuss issues with woke content changes, which either generate some of these writing problems, like with the portrayal of Galadriel, or they're actually swept aside by these writing problems, like why there are black elves and dwarves in the Second Age but not in the Third Age. In their drive to make Tolkien's work more diverse, to reflect the times we live in, they've actually made a world where genocides must occur for the plot to work out. This episode is a 1 out of 10, again, almost solely for the music. The only hope to save it is Halbrand, who is most likely Sauron, banging Galadriel over a barrel as Numenor is swept away by a giant wave, and then Galadriel gives birth to a Balrog 9 months later. Comment down below if you have any suggestions for me or about this video. Thank you for watching my video. Hit the like button if you liked it. Hit the dislike if you didn't. Please share this video if you enjoyed it. My name is Matt. This has been another episode of Unbearable 73. Have a nice day. I am out of here.